Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rocky here with Father Boniface Six. And Father, we obviously talk about the relationships we have with ourselves a lot because they're kind of the foundations of how we go out and present the rest of the world. And some of the topics we discuss around this are the baggage we're having inside ourselves, trauma that we've gone through, and we talk about how this relates in our relationships with others. For instance, the passive aggressive episode that we had last week was how do we relate to others that are giving us negative feedback to us? How do we go about it? Do we go into a shell? Do we go run and hide? Do we become aggressive? Do we become mean? Or do we figure out a solution to make it happy and well? And I'm really glad how that episode landed with going through an example of how to bring things together happy and well. And we've talked about different things in the past, such as how to check our own anger and how to not blow up at people, and obviously the importance thereof. And what I wanted to do in this episode is a conversation I don't believe we've explicitly had before. And if we have, one of the listeners can let me know. One of the perks of making 300 episodes is we are now past my memory of everything we've talked about. But I do know that the common thread that we have is Father Boniface is teaching us to make better relationships. And that's really what matters here. So I want to focus in that prism of internally the relationship we have with ourselves, and that these reactions to trauma that are instinctually built within us are being created by all of us inherently with non-adult brains. Because when things happen to us as a child, we obviously don't have adult brains yet that we can look back upon and reflect with new knowledge and new information. And what I wanted to talk about was how to put ourselves in a state where we're gentle enough with ourselves, but objective enough where we can analyze these feelings, what happened, and kind of make a game plan for if this feeling would get sparked again, if this trauma would get reignited, how would I want to deal about it this time in this space and time as an adult mind compared to the pre-default setting that my child brain wrote that if we never check it will be my pattern for my entire life. So that's what I wanted to talk about here. I think it's a very important thing that starts with us healing ourselves and helping ourselves to be better in the world.
That's a great question, Joe, and so important. And I'm already feeling inadequate to give the answer that I really want to give. And I know there are some great teachers out there. I really appreciate the writings of Alison Cook, and I think her Dr. Allison Cook is .com or something is her website, and also the JP2 Healing Center, Dr. Bob Schutz, and their podcast Restore the Glory. I think they do a great job exploring some of those things. And there's a great program called Grief to Grace, Teresa Burke put together, and it really uses a lot of um, different kinds of reflections and our leverages our Catholic spirituality, but does it in a way that really helps people to connect with their grief and connect with the trauma, connect with the pain in a way that can also help them to do exactly what you just described very well. You talked about the child brain and the adult brain, and the child brain gets triggered in trauma. I think of brain often connected more with thinking, and it's an older model of cognitive behavioral therapy that if you just change the thoughts, that's enough. And I know you didn't mean it that way. We've talked about it otherwise. And of course, the brain is responsible for hormones and other things. It's technically not wrong biologically speaking, but the challenge is to connect with that child part of us. I like internal family systems uses a language of parts, and there's a protector part of me, and there's a vulnerable part of me, there's a manager part of me, there's a firefighter part of me. We actually think in those terms, and we sometimes even use those sorts of expressions. There's a part of me that's really angry, and there's a part of me that's really hurt. And that's really true. Both things are happening at the same time. Sometimes the anger covers over the hurt. And so I'm not in touch with the hurt part as much. And I have to help the anger to settle down a little bit in order to get in touch with the hurt. And those are some of those internal dynamics that are uh, an aspect of the complexity and the richness of human life, that we have all of that, and it's really important to be able to connect with it. But anyway, I just mentioned a couple of other resources there, what we're able to do in a few minutes, and will hopefully stir the interest of our listeners, and will hopefully be a healing podcast, an enlightening podcast. I had to smile when you said a little earlier, our last podcast was passive aggressive or something like that. Our passive aggressive podcast. So fortunately, it wasn't. The podcast wasn't passive aggressive, and neither were we that way towards each other. And we have a very good relationship that way. That you're so good in your humility at different times to say, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I feel like if I throw this out there, you'll figure it out and you'll tell me if I'm wrong. And so we don't need to be passive aggressive, because it's really honest and humble and trusting. And from the outset of our discussion about doing a podcast 300 episodes ago, it's amazing to think about that. I proposed, after talking with you, that we just talk, that we have a relationship through the podcast, and we talk about things that are interesting to you, and that'll be things that are interesting to other people. And so I love your summary that the podcasts have become about relationships. And uh, in a sense, we set out to do that. Our relationship just sort of being on display in some way, and that being a model for and other people's relationships, and then to actually talk about that. And I'm just delighted to be thought of as the relationship guy. That's really reaches the heart of what I do and what I find so important, so valuable. So thanks for just wanted to acknowledge a couple of those comments that you made. So how do we connect? And I mentioned, some of that writing and some of those. Grief to Grace is a 5-day retreat. The JP2 Healing Center does a lot of things, healing the whole person, restoring the glory, and different kinds of retreat experiences. I think those are really helpful. There's a way that when we take ourselves out of our environment, we put ourselves in a new environment, we give ourselves the space to kind of focus on some of the internal dynamics, what things get triggered, where I get hurt, how I react, what situations bring that up in me, what puts me into the child brain as you described it, or what activates those child parts when I get blended with particular protectors, is the way that they would say it in IFS. And so just being able to take the time apart and focus a little bit of attention on that is really helpful. Now, the other thing is that when we're not triggered, when we're kind of floating along nicely and there aren't problems that are coming up. And when I say triggered, I'm just thinking about you. We were talking about scheduling, and you mentioned your son, takes a nap in the afternoon, and it just made me think of the chaos that a house with children can sometimes stir up. And I think of some mothers that I know who, when the several children are kind of out of control, and it really hits some things in them that they feel overwhelmed. And maybe that's a connection to a childhood house where there was chaos, or sometimes a childhood house where the one or another parents were a little bit unstable, and then the child learned a defense of, if I'm okay, everything will be okay. If I do everything right, everything will be all right. If I'm perfect, then mom won't be angry. And that taking on that kind of responsibility at a young age, and also being very sensitive to changes in moods and the kind of chaos that can set mom off, and the disorder in the house. And then as an adult, when they're in a situation where the children are out of control, and or just being children, not even out of control in a kind of extreme way, but the house is messy, things are crazy, and they just the mother feels like, I can't get it all together. And then it hits this place of pain and helplessness. And the fear, it really brings up a fear of, like, my mother is going to freak out on me. Now, we wouldn't even bring that into a conscious thought necessarily. And we would identify it as a kind of irrational thought. This is a mother, her mother's not even in the picture. And yet that kind of pain gets triggered, and then I try to take control, and then maybe taking control means I start yelling, and then I have this kind of like, I hate myself for yelling at my children, and my heart is being torn apart by this, and then I'm trying to hold down the anger, and then I'm just feeling terrible about myself, and I start to get depressed. And you can see how there's just layers of things happening there. And so I hope I'm saying that with enough gentleness and reverence that it might be hitting some of our listeners. And I hope that you're hearing it with a lot of acceptance and understanding, because wow, to carry around some of those wounds and to have some of those sensitivities to be in that kind of situation is really hard. And those things aren't willed, and we can't just make them different by trying harder or telling ourselves to stop it.
Yeah, and if you look at that example, it's clearly not one you made up. There's a lot of people who go through the world thinking that they have to pitch a perfect game every single second of every day, and it's not feasible. And one of the things that came to my mind as you were telling me, it was the visualization I saw in a presentation, was that the amount of real estate that our brains have devoted to logic compared to feelings is not even close to the same. We are much, much more devoted to feelings. And a side thought I had while I was going to this, you know, I've never seen like a wild animal like contemplating feelings. They're always just acting on instinct. Like the raccoon gets a light shine in his eyes, it freezes, and then it runs. Deer are the same way. I never really see them like looking at me and contemplating, like, where is that light coming from? Why is it so bright? Why is it shining at me? But this is something that we have that obviously makes us as unique. Just a random side thought that might not really go anywhere. But to the point of having to be perfect. And I think that everything you just said there, there's certainly people that we can see in our lives that have this in flight. We might even have it ourselves. And I think it's important to connect the other part of what you said in the beginning here of looking into consciously creating a space that is going to give you the ability to gently internalize and ask these questions about what's going on. Because if you talk to someone who is in that zone, they're not going to think anything's wrong with them. They're going to go, look at my numbers. They're perfect. Like, they're awesome. I'm getting things done because I'm constantly grinding. That's why I got straight A's in school. That's why I did all this, that, and the other. Everything is like this. And what I want to talk about is not to grind the problem, but to analyze, say, like, okay, we're in a situation where things aren't broken or explicitly bad. We're not in the obvious, we're blowing people up, we want to, burn things literally to the ground. We're not in that state of anger. But this example of basically burning ourselves out through stress of perfectness is real and common. Um, how can we look at this example, or maybe if we can go into another one, it's a little easier to explain how we can see that things from our childhood are impacting us that are worth reevaluating in a safe place, as well as pointing out that these retreats do exist for these places for us to think about ourselves, but really to kind of identify, like, I should be looking into the signing up for retreat because this might be a thing that it's causing a problem in the long run.
Well, yeah, I would offer a couple of practices that we can do on our own, and in a time of prayer, for example. If the kind of situation I described with a mother who goes through the chaos, and it triggers the chaos of her childhood, and then her efforts to kind of control it or fall short, and then maybe an angry outburst, and then that self blame that comes up. Um, yeah, obviously you make it through that, and maybe the husband coming home is a help, maybe the end of the day and the children are in bed is a help, and there's a settles down the environment a little bit. We tend to run away from those negative feelings and try to pretend that they don't exist until they come up again and we're overwhelmed again by them. To be intentional about it and to revisit from that more safe place where we can be a bit more in control of the process. It's not in control of us. And then just to press into it, what is this feeling that I'm having? And can I give it a voice? What does it want to say to me? Is a way of thinking about that. This maybe this kind of perfectionism. Why? And I could sort of ask that perfectionist part of me, what are you afraid will happen if you're not perfect? And sometimes the spontaneous words that come out, mom will be angry at me. It's like, oh, okay, well, so that's connecting there. And then sometimes that can help me to connect to a little child. The mother realizes there's a little girl in her who's still afraid of her mother's angry reactions, and then she can connect with that child and be a little bit curious about it, have some compassion on herself. So those are the kinds of postures that we take towards ourselves, not a sort of like, I got to fix this or else the house is burning down and everything is terrible. So those tend to be their own kinds of protectors. And then getting a little distance from them, what are you afraid is going to happen if you don't fix this, if you don't address this? So we can find spaces to feel the feeling, to talk to it, and find out what it's trying to say to us. You mentioned animals, so there are actually interesting things that happen with animals. They do go through some of these kinds of trauma cycles. I mean, you probably have seen a dog that's been beaten, and it reacts to things that it shouldn't react to. So it's highly triggered for fight or flight. So animals also get traumatized and triggered by things. Animals don't have the capacity for self-reflection, and so they don't know why they're getting triggered. So what do you do with animals? You need to connect with that part of them, and the part that's fearful of you, you have to develop trust in again, and you do that through a lot of gentleness. And in some way that's what we're doing with ourselves, but we're able to do it with ourselves, and in a way that animals aren't. We also can be greatly helped by other people. And something like Grief to Grace is a way you have trained professionals. There are therapists, there's usually a chaplain, and then there are volunteer team members who have gone through the retreat themselves and understand the dynamics of it and are well formed in it. And they're able to help you connect with that place in yourself where you feel that pain, or where that emotion rises up, and they're able to bring you into dialogue. So there's a way that we can find ourselves connecting with the pain of a little child and start interacting out of that with someone who is taking care of us. And like, I'm just so afraid of what's going to happen, and the emotion can come up and the words come out, and then you're really working with that part of you that needs to be loved, that needs to be brought into relationship, that needs for those early experiences with mom to be reformed, to be brought into the present, that we don't get stuck in the past. Like you said earlier, I thought that was very well said. We don't want to get stuck in the past, but we want to bring those parts of us that have been hurt in the past, that are stuck in the past, into the present. But then we have to connect with those places emotionally, and we can bring those places into relationship with someone. So that's the process of sort of unearthing and understanding and relating. And then that's a process that takes place over time. You can think of um, this stuff is kind of written in our flesh. Thoughts move quickly, but emotions move slowly, and emotions need to be kind of opened up and felt, and they need to grow. There's something organic there that has to grow and change over time. And so that's we have to be patient with that process as well. As I said, it really works best when it's in relationship, and this is in some way what therapy and transference is doing. And when we're connecting with a therapist, a counselor, we're having a chance to work through some of that stuff that sometimes we can't even, even taking the time, stepping aside, going apart from our lives, we just can't connect with those things. They're too painful, they're too difficult, we don't know how to get into that. And so having another person who can help us is always a great value, not an absolute necessity, but always a great value. But then we have to carry on the work ourselves in between times, and connect with those parts of us. So it's it's good work, hard work, healing work, and certainly very worthwhile.
Yeah, and if we think about it, just kind of going through the example you gave there of how easy it is for us to be growing up under the fear of having to be perfect and then becoming the one who makes that happen upon our kids around us. And it's really easy to see how this generational problem can just keep repeating itself naturally. And it does take a conscious effort that if there was something that you didn't like in your childhood, to figure out if that is within you now and you're exhibiting outwards, because we have the ability to control what we pass on. That is one of the things that we can control. We control the way we react to things, the way that we think about things, the way that we say things. And it's an invitation to go and reflect upon ourselves and then go to a place of prayer or a retreat and really try to figure out what's going on, and then if necessary go to long-term helpers, like the type of therapies that exist and stuff like that. So we do hope that this episode has helped people, has opened up possibilities for improvement that will not only just affect yourself, the relationship you have with yourself, but the relationship you have with everyone else, and always recognizing that it's always underneath the umbrella of the relationship that you have with God. And everything, basically, as long as you put the effort in, will be paid out multifold at the end. So we thank everyone for listening. Please continue to share us, subscribe to us, and let us know about the other people. If you have not, leaving a review is a way that Apple and all the other little places that our podcast is at let them know about us. So please let us have a review on your service so that we can move forward and help getting to more and more people. Thank you very much.